My mother's whisper still echoes in my mind like a death sentence. Nobody will help you, Ethan. Those 5 words, spoken in the dim hallway of her modest Austin home, crushed something inside me that I didn't even know could break. What she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that folded in my back pocket was a lottery ticket worth $47 million. My name is Ethan Crawford, and I'm 57 years old. For most of my life, I've been what people in Texas call salt of the earth, a reliable man who worked construction, paid his bills, and never asked for much. I lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of San Antonio, drove a 15-year-old Ford pickup, and bought my groceries with coupons. I wasn't poor, but I wasn't rich either. I was just surviving. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday in October. The Texas heat was finally breaking, and there was that crisp feeling in the air that makes you believe good things might be possible. I had just finished a roofing job for Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who paid me in cash and homemade apple pie. As I drove home, covered in sawdust and sweat, I stopped at Murphy's Corner store like I did every Tuesday for the past 12 years. "The usual, Ethan?" asked Rosa, the cashier who knew everyone's routine in our small town. "Yeah, 1 Powerball ticket, same numbers," I replied, handing her the crumpled $5 bill. The numbers were a combination of family birthdays, my late father's, my mother's, my ex-wife Sarah's, and my daughter Emma's. Even though Sarah had left me 8 years ago and Emma barely spoke to me anymore, those dates still meant something. I tucked the ticket into my wallet and forgot about it, just like I did every week. 3 days later, I was eating leftover Chinese takeout and watching the evening news when the lottery numbers flashed across the screen. At first, I wasn't really paying attention. The reporter's voice was just background noise as I scrolled through job listings on my phone, looking for the next gig. But then something made me look up. Tonight's winning Powerball numbers are 7, 12, 23, 31, 42, and the Powerball is 15. My fork dropped to the floor with a metallic clang. 7, 12, 23, 31, 42, 15. My hands shook as I fumbled for my wallet, pulling out the wrinkled ticket. I checked the numbers once, twice, 3 times. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought I might have a heart attack right there on my threadbare couch. It was real. After 12 years of playing the same numbers, I had won $47 million. I sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours, staring at that little piece of paper that had just transformed my entire existence. Part of me wanted to shout, to call someone, to share this impossible moment. But who would I call? Sarah was remarried and living in Dallas with her new husband. Emma was in college in California and only texted me on my birthday. My few friends were work buddies who I grabbed beers with occasionally, but we weren't the type to share life-changing news. Then I thought of my mother. Mom lived alone in the house where I grew up, about 2 hours away in Austin. We hadn't spoken in almost 6 months, not since our last argument about money. She had always been critical of my life choices, disappointed that I never became the lawyer or doctor she had dreamed of. But she was still my mother, and despite everything, I loved her. Maybe this news would finally make her proud of me. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I had never done in 20 years unless I was genuinely ill. I tucked the lottery ticket carefully into my wallet, showered, and put on my best shirt. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful as I drove toward Austin. The house looked smaller than I remembered, its white paint peeling and the front porch sagging slightly. Mom's garden, which had once been her pride and joy, was overgrown with weeds. I felt a pang of guilt seeing how she was living, knowing I could have helped more over the years. I knocked on the familiar wooden door, my heart racing with anticipation. Mom opened it slowly, her 79-year-old frame smaller and more fragile than when I'd last seen her. Her gray hair was pulled back in a bun, and she wore the same floral housecoat she'd had for years. When she saw me, her expression didn't change, no smile, no surprise, just the same look of weary disappointment I'd grown accustomed to. "Ethan," she said simply. "What do you want?" "Hi, Mom. I have some news. Good news. Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly. The house smelled like old coffee and lavender air freshener, exactly as it always had. Family photos lined the hallway, pictures of me as a child, my wedding day with Sarah, Emma's school pictures. But I noticed that the more recent photos were missing, as if my adult life had been erased from her memory. We sat in the living room where I had watched Saturday morning cartoons as a kid. The furniture was the same, but everything felt different, smaller, sadder, weighted down by years of silence and resentment. "Mom, I need to tell you something incredible," I began, reaching for my wallet. "Yesterday, I found out that I—" "Before you say anything," she interrupted, her voice sharp, "if you're here asking for money again, the answer is no. I don't have anything to give you, Ethan." I froze. "I'm not here asking for money, Mom. Actually, it's the opposite. I wanted to. I'm tired," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "I'm tired of your problems, your failed marriage, your inability to make something of yourself. I raised you better than this." The words hit me like physical blows. "Mom, please, just let me explain. Something amazing has happened." She stood up abruptly, her hands trembling slightly. "I've heard your stories before, Ethan. Your big plans, your schemes, your promises that things will be different. I'm done pretending to believe them." "This isn't a scheme," I said desperately, pulling out the lottery ticket. "Mom, I won. I won the lottery. $47 million. We don't have to worry about money anymore. I can take care of you, fix up the house, make sure you're comfortable." She looked at the ticket in my hand with complete disbelief, then her expression hardened into something I had never seen before, not just disappointment, but disgust. "Do you really think I'm that stupid?" she asked quietly. "Do you think I'm some senile old woman who will fall for whatever lie you're telling today? It's not a lie, Mom. Look at the numbers. Check them against last night's drawing. This is real." But she wasn't listening anymore. She walked to the front door and opened it, standing there with her back straight despite her age. "I want you to leave, Ethan. Mom, please. Just give me 5 minutes to prove." I said leave. I stood up slowly, the lottery ticket still in my hand. As I walked toward the door, I tried one more time. "Mom, I know we've had our problems, but I'm your son. I've always been your son. This changes everything. We can start over." She looked at me then, and what I saw in her eyes broke something fundamental inside me. It wasn't just disbelief or anger, it was complete, total rejection. As if I were a stranger who had wandered into her home making wild claims. Then she leaned close to me, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than if she had screamed. "Nobody will help you, Ethan. Nobody." The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. I stood on her porch for a long time, holding a piece of paper worth $47 million, feeling poorer than I had ever felt in my life. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly, and I could hear the neighborhood sounds, dogs barking, children playing, normal life continuing as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. As I drove away from my childhood home, one thought consumed me: my mother had chosen not to believe in me, even when salvation was literally in my hand. The woman who had given birth to me, raised me, and supposedly loved me, had decided I wasn't worth 5 minutes of her time. That night, alone in my apartment, I made a decision that would change not just my life, but hers as well. If she thought I was worthless, if she believed nobody would help me, then I would show her exactly what the man she had dismissed was capable of. I was going to build an empire. And she was going to see every single dollar of it. If this story is touching your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will move you. Your support means everything, and it helps us continue sharing these powerful human experiences. The Texas Lottery office in Austin was a 40-minute drive from my apartment, but it felt like crossing into another dimension. For 3 days after my mother's rejection, I had carried that winning ticket like a loaded gun, afraid to claim it, afraid of what my life would become once I did. I hadn't slept properly since that terrible afternoon at Mom's house. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her whisper, "Nobody will help you." Those words had burrowed into my soul like a parasite, eating away at every good memory I had of our relationship. But they had also ignited something else, a burning determination to prove her wrong in the most spectacular way possible. The lottery office was a sterile government building that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. I sat in the waiting area, surrounded by other people clutching tickets, their faces painted with desperate hope. Some were obviously poor, wearing clothes that had seen better days. Others looked middle class, like me, people who played the lottery as a weekly ritual rather than a lifeline. None of them knew they were sitting next to someone who had already won. Ethan Crawford, called a middle-aged woman in a business suit. I followed her into a small office where she asked me to verify my identity, confirm the ticket's authenticity, and choose between the lump sum or annual payments. My hands shook as I signed document after document, each signature bringing me closer to a reality I still couldn't fully comprehend. "Congratulations, Mr. Crawford," she said with practiced professionalism. "After taxes, your lump sum payment will be approximately $28 million. The funds will be transferred to your bank account within 5 business days. $28 million. I walked out of that office a multimillionaire, but I felt emptier than ever. There was no one to call, no one to share this moment with. The first person I had thought of, my mother, had already made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with me or my stories. That afternoon, I sat in my truck in the parking lot of a Walmart, staring at my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, looking for someone, anyone, who might understand the magnitude of what had just happened. But the truth was devastating. I had no one. 57 years on this earth, and I was completely alone at the most important moment of my life. That's when I made the second decision that would define everything that came next. I drove to the fanciest real estate office in Austin, Preston and Associates, the kind of place that sold million-dollar homes to oil executives and tech entrepreneurs. The receptionist looked at me skeptically when I walked in wearing my work boots and a wrinkled polo shirt, clearly assuming I was lost or confused. "Can I help you?" she asked with barely concealed condescension. "I'd like to speak with someone about purchasing a home," I said. "A very expensive home." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Miranda Preston herself, a perfectly manicured woman in her 50s who specialized in Austin's luxury market. She had agreed to see me only after I showed her a bank statement on my phone, something I had never thought I would need to do. "What exactly are you looking for, Mr. Crawford?" she asked, her tone now respectful but curious. "The most expensive house you have," I said. "Something that makes a statement. Something impossible to ignore." She raised an eyebrow. "I have several properties in the 5 to 10 million range that might." "No," I interrupted. "I want something bigger. Something that will be talked about. Money is not an issue." Miranda studied me for a long moment, then turned to her computer. After several minutes of clicking and scrolling, she found what I was looking for. "There is one property," she said slowly. "It's been on the market for 2 years because of the price point. $12 million. It's a custom-built mansion in Westlake Hills, Austin's most exclusive neighborhood. 18,000 square feet, 8 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, indoor pool, wine cellar, theater room, and a view of Lake Austin that's absolutely breathtaking. She turned her laptop screen toward me, and I saw my future, a massive stone and glass structure that looked like it belonged to a movie star or tech billionaire. It was ostentatious, over the top, and absolutely perfect. "I'll take it," I said. Miranda blinked. "Mr. Crawford, don't you want to see it first? Schedule a showing? Have an inspection?" "No. I want to buy it today. Cash offer, no contingencies." What followed was the most surreal afternoon of my life. Lawyers were called, documents were expedited, and by 6 p.m., I owned a $12 million mansion. The previous owners, a tech executive who had moved to California, were so shocked by the immediate cash offer that they agreed to leave most of the furniture. I spent my first night in the mansion sitting alone in a living room bigger than my entire old apartment, surrounded by luxury I had never imagined owning. The silence was deafening. Every footstep echoed through halls that seemed to stretch forever. I had everything money could buy, and I had never felt more isolated in my life. But isolation wasn't the point anymore. Proving my worth was. The next morning, I drove back to my old apartment to pack my few belongings. As I loaded my truck, Mrs. Henderson from next door came out to water her plants. "Moving day, Ethan?" she asked pleasantly. She was a sweet elderly woman who had always been kind to me. "Yes, ma'am. Got myself a new place." "Well, I hope it's somewhere nice. You deserve good things." Her words hit me unexpectedly hard. Here was someone who barely knew me, yet she believed I deserved good things. My own mother couldn't manage that level of basic human decency. "It's in Westlake Hills," I said quietly. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. "My goodness. You must have gotten a wonderful new job." "Good for you, dear." I didn't correct her. Let her think what she wanted. But her genuine happiness for my success only highlighted the cruelty of my mother's response. That evening, I stood on the balcony of my new mansion, looking out over Lake Austin as the sun set behind the hills. The view was worth millions, but all I could think about was the look in my mother's eyes when she told me nobody would help me. I pulled out my phone and did something I had never done before. I hired a professional photographer and a drone operator to come to the house the next day. If my mother thought I was worthless, if she believed I was just another one of my failed schemes, then I was going to show her exactly what her rejection had cost her. But first, I needed to decide what kind of man this new wealth would make me. The old Ethan had been humble, forgiving, always hoping for acceptance. The new Ethan, the one with $28 million and a mansion that could be seen from space, he was going to be different. He was going to be the kind of man who made people regret underestimating him. As I stood there in the gathering darkness, surrounded by more luxury than I had ever dreamed possible, I realized that winning the lottery hadn't just changed my financial situation. It had revealed something fundamental about the people in my life, and about myself. My mother had chosen to believe the worst about me, even when presented with proof of the best. That choice was going to haunt both of us for a very long time. Because tomorrow, I was going to make sure she knew exactly what she had turned away from her door. The professional photographer arrived at my mansion at 9 a.m. sharp, along with a drone operator who looked like he'd stepped out of a tech commercial. I had hired the best in Austin, people who usually photographed celebrity homes for architectural magazines. They spent 3 hours capturing every angle of the property, from the sweeping circular driveway to the infinity pool that seemed to blend into Lake Austin itself. "This is incredible, Mr. Crawford," said Marcus, the photographer, as he adjusted his lens to capture the mansion's stone facade. "I've photographed some stunning homes, but this place is truly special. The way the morning light hits these windows, it's like the house is glowing." I watched him work, feeling a strange mix of pride and emptiness. Yes, it was beautiful. Yes, it was impressive. But it was also just a building, an expensive, lonely building that couldn't fill the hole my mother's words had carved in my chest. I need these photos printed, I told him. Large format, professional quality. And I need them today. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Today? That's going to cost extra for the rush job. Money isn't a problem. While I waited for the photos, I drove into downtown Austin and did something else I had never done. I bought a new wardrobe. Not just clothes, but an entire transformation. At Nordstrom, a personal shopper named Jennifer helped me select tailored suits, Italian leather shoes, and accessories that cost more than I used to make in a month. "You have excellent taste, Mr. Crawford," she said as I tried on a charcoal gray suit that fit like it had been made for me. "This Armani is perfect for your build." I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Gone was the weathered construction worker in boots and jeans. In his place stood someone who looked like he belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. "I'll take everything," I said. By 4 p.m., I had the photos, stunning 16 by 20 prints that made my mansion look like something from a luxury real estate magazine. I also had documentation, bank statements, the lottery confirmation, the deed to the house. Everything I needed to prove that the worthless son my mother had dismissed was now worth more than she could have imagined. I drove toward Austin in my newly purchased BMW, another impulse buy that had happened sometime between the clothing store and the photo pickup. The old truck was fine for the old Ethan, but the new Ethan needed transportation that matched his station. My mother's neighborhood looked even more rundown than I remembered. As I pulled up to her house in a car that cost more than most people's annual salary, wearing a suit that cost more than her monthly Social Security check, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. This time, she would have to listen. I knocked on her door, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and rage. When she opened it and saw me standing there, her expression shifted from surprise to suspicion. "Ethan? What are you doing here? And why are you dressed like?" She stopped, taking in my appearance. "What is this about?" "Hello, Mother," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "May I come in? I have something to show you." She hesitated, clearly unsettled by my transformation, then stepped aside. I walked into the familiar living room, but this time I felt different. Confident. Powerful. Vindicated. "Mom, 3 days ago, you told me that nobody would help me. You called me a liar when I tried to tell you about winning the lottery. You threw me out of your house without even looking at the proof I was offering." Her face hardened. "Ethan, I'm not going through this again. Whatever scheme you're running now." "It's not a scheme," I interrupted, pulling out the photographs. I laid them across her coffee table, one by one. "This is my house. This is what you refused to believe was possible." She stared at the photos, her mouth slightly open. Even in her stubborn disbelief, she couldn't deny what she was seeing. The mansion was magnificent, undeniably real, and obviously expensive. "This is some kind of trick," she said weakly. "You probably found these pictures online or—" I pulled out my phone and showed her the bank statements. $28 million, Mom. After taxes. From the Texas lottery, drawn last Tuesday night. I placed the official lottery documentation next to the photos. "I won. Everything I told you was true." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I watched her face as the reality slowly penetrated her defenses. The documentation was too detailed to be fake, the photos too professional to be borrowed, my transformation too complete to be a costume. "I don't understand," she whispered. When did this happen?" "It happened the day before I came to see you. The day you told me I was worthless. The day you decided I wasn't worth 5 minutes of your time." She looked up at me then, and for the first time, I saw something I had never seen in her eyes when she looked at me: respect. And something else, fear. Ethan, I had no idea. You have to understand, you've disappointed me so many times over the years. Your marriage failed, you never finished college, you worked construction jobs while your friends became professionals. I thought. You thought I was lying, I said. Even when I was holding the winning ticket in my hand, begging you to look at it, you chose to believe I was a con artist rather than your son who had finally caught a break. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. When she turned back to me, her expression had changed again. Now there was something calculating in her eyes, something that made my stomach turn. Well, this changes everything, doesn't it? She said, her voice taking on a tone I recognized from my childhood, the tone she used when she wanted something. I mean, we're family, Ethan. I know I was harsh the other day, but you have to understand my position. I've been hurt before by people making promises they couldn't keep. Are you serious right now? I asked, incredulous. I'm your mother, she continued, moving closer to me. I raised you, sacrificed for you. Now that you have all this money, surely you understand that family comes first. I could move into one of those nice senior communities, finally get the medical care I need, maybe take some of those trips I've always dreamed about. The transformation was instant and nauseating. The woman who had whispered, "Nobody will help you," was now positioning herself as deserving of help. The mother who had treated me like a burden was now claiming her sacrifices entitled her to my fortune. "You want me to take care of you," I said slowly. "Of course. That's what children do for their parents. I know I wasn't perfect, but I did my best. And now, with all this money, you can afford to be generous." I stared at her for a long moment, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. When I had imagined this conversation, I had pictured different scenarios, her apologizing, her being proud of me, her asking for forgiveness. I had never imagined this, her immediately calculating how to profit from the success she had refused to acknowledge. "Do you remember what you said to me 3 days ago?" I asked quietly. "Ethan, let's not dwell on the past. We both said things we didn't mean. You said nobody would help me. You whispered it like a curse, like you wanted it to be true." She waved her hand dismissively. I was upset. People say things when they're upset. "No, Mom. You revealed something. You showed me exactly how you really feel about me. When you thought I was poor and desperate, I wasn't worth your time. Now that you know I'm rich, suddenly I'm family again." Her mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the truth in her eyes. She knew exactly what she had done, and she didn't care. She was betting that my desire for her love would override my memory of her cruelty. "I think you should leave," she said when she realized her manipulation wasn't working. "You're obviously still upset, and you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years," I replied, gathering up the photographs. "You're right about one thing, though. This does change everything." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to her. "For 57 years, I've been hoping to earn your respect, your love, your approval. I thought if I just tried harder, achieved more, proved myself worthy, you might finally see me as something other than a disappointment." She started to speak, but I held up my hand. "But winning the lottery taught me something important. It's not that I wasn't worthy of your love, it's that you're not worthy of mine." I left her standing in that living room surrounded by the same family photos that had once made me feel guilty for not being a better son. But as I drove away in my expensive car, heading back to my mansion on the lake, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: freedom. The old Ethan would have forgiven her. The old Ethan would have convinced himself that she deserved another chance, that family was more important than self-respect. But the new Ethan understood that some bridges were meant to be burned. The weeks following my confrontation with my mother passed in a strange haze of luxury and loneliness. I had everything money could buy, but the victory felt hollow. Every morning, I woke up in a king-sized bed that could have housed a small family, surrounded by silence so complete it felt oppressive. I tried to fill the void with purchases. I bought a boat I didn't know how to operate. I had a home theater installed with sound equipment that cost more than most people's cars. I hired a chef, a housekeeper, and a groundskeeper, not because I needed them, but because the emptiness of the mansion was driving me insane. But the staff, professional as they were, maintained careful boundaries. They called me Mr. Crawford, completed their tasks efficiently, and went home to their own families each evening, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my regrets. 3 weeks after the confrontation, my phone rang at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar, California. My heart jumped as I realized who it might be. "Hello?" I answered. "Dad?" The voice was cautious, uncertain. "Emma." My daughter, calling for the first time in months. "Emma. Sweetheart, how are you?" I sat up in bed, suddenly fully awake. I'm okay. "Dad, I got a weird call from Grandma yesterday. She said some things that didn't make sense, and I thought I should talk to you directly." My stomach dropped. "What did she tell you?" "She said you won the lottery and bought some big house, but that you were acting crazy and cruel. She made it sound like you were having some kind of breakdown and had become mean to her. She was crying, Dad. I've never heard Grandma cry like that." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of my mother's manipulation. Even in her 70s, she was still an expert at playing the victim, at rewriting history to cast herself as the wounded party. "Emma, there's a lot your grandmother didn't tell you. So it's true? You really won the lottery?" "Yes. $47 million. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." There was a long pause. "Dad, why didn't you call me immediately? I'm your daughter. This is huge news." The hurt in her voice cut through me like a blade. "I wanted to, sweetheart. But things got complicated with your grandmother, and I wasn't sure how you'd react. I know you and your mother think I'm just the guy who fixes roofs and struggles to pay bills. That's not true, Dad. I mean, yes, you're not wealthy, weren't wealthy, but you're still my father. I would have been happy for you. Would you?" I asked quietly. "Emma, when was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you called me just to talk, not because it was my birthday or a holiday?" Another pause, longer this time. "That's not fair." "Maybe not. But it's true." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, processing what I'd said. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more vulnerable. "Dad, what really happened with Grandma?" So I told her everything. The lottery win, my excitement at sharing the news, my mother's immediate dismissal of my claims, her cruel whisper that nobody would help me, and finally, her instant transformation when she realized the money was real. Emma listened without interrupting, and when I finished, the silence stretched so long I thought she had hung up. "Dad," she finally said, "I believe you. About Grandma, I mean. She's always been different with you than she is with me and Mom. I noticed it growing up, but I thought it was just because you were the son and we were the women, you know? Different expectations. It's more than that, Emma. Your grandmother has never thought I was good enough. Not for your mother, not for the family, not for anything. The only thing that surprised me was how quickly she changed her tune when she realized I actually had money. That's really sad, Dad." "It is. But it also freed me from something I didn't realize was holding me back. What do you mean? I got up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the lake. The morning sun was painting the water gold, and I could see expensive boats dotting the horizon, boats owned by people who had never doubted their worth the way I had. For 57 years, I've been trying to earn your grandmother's approval. Every choice I made, every job I took, every relationship I had, part of me was always wondering what she would think, whether it would finally be enough to make her proud. Dad. When your mother left me, do you know what your grandmother said? She said it was because I had never learned how to be the kind of man a woman could respect. When I took construction jobs instead of going back to school, she said I was settling for mediocrity. When you stopped calling regularly, she implied it was because I wasn't the kind of father who inspired love. I could hear Emma crying softly on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't know she said those things. It's not your fault, sweetheart. But it helps explain why I've been so angry since winning this money. I finally had proof that I could succeed, that I was worth something, and her first instinct was still to tear me down. But now what? You can't just hate Grandma forever. And Dad, I have to ask, are you okay? Like, mentally and emotionally? This is a huge life change, and Grandma made it sound like you were becoming someone she didn't recognize. The question hit me harder than I expected. Was I okay? I had more money than I could spend in several lifetimes, a house that belonged in architectural magazines, and freedom from my mother's toxic expectations. By any measurable standard, I should be ecstatic. Instead, I felt unmoored, drifting through a life that felt too big and too empty at the same time. I don't know, I admitted. I thought having money would solve my problems, but it's created new ones. I thought proving my worth would make me feel better, but it's just shown me how many years I wasted caring about the opinions of people who never had my best interests at heart. Including me? She asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Did I blame Emma for the distance between us? Was I angry at her for following her mother's lead and treating me like a secondary figure in her life? I don't know, I repeated. I love you, Emma. I've always loved you. But I can't pretend that it doesn't hurt when the only time my phone rings is when your grandmother calls you with stories about me acting strange. That's fair, she said after a moment. Dad, I want to see you. I want to see this house, and I want to understand what's happening with you. Can I fly out next weekend? Really? Really? And Dad? I'm proud of you. I know Grandma wasn't, and I know that hurt you. But I'm proud that my father won the lottery, and I'm proud that you stood up to her when she tried to manipulate you. After we hung up, I sat in my massive kitchen and cried for the first time since the day my mother whispered those cruel words. But these weren't tears of pain or frustration, they were tears of hope. Maybe the money hadn't just cost me relationships. Maybe it had also revealed which relationships were worth saving. As I planned Emma's visit, I found myself wondering, if my daughter could see past my mistakes and love me despite my flaws, why had I spent so many years believing that love had to be earned rather than freely given? And more importantly, what kind of man did I want to be now that I was finally free to choose? What would you do in his place? Would you forgive your mother and try to rebuild the relationship, or would you focus on the family members who truly support you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The week before Emma's arrival, I found myself obsessing over details I had never cared about before. I hired an interior designer to make the mansion feel more welcoming, less like a showpiece and more like a home. I stocked the kitchen with Emma's favorite foods from when she was a child: mac and cheese, chocolate chip cookies, the strawberry yogurt she used to eat every morning before school. I realized I was trying to recreate moments from 20 years ago, back when being her father felt natural and unconditional. Sarah had insisted on driving Emma to the airport in Dallas, which meant I wouldn't have to face my ex-wife yet. That confrontation would come eventually, news of my lottery win wouldn't stay secret forever, but I wasn't ready for that particular conversation. When Emma emerged from the arrival gate at Austin Bergstrom International, I almost didn't recognize her. The last time I had seen her in person was at Christmas 2 years ago, when she was still carrying some of the softness of adolescence. Now, at 25, she looked like a complete adult, confident, beautiful, and startlingly similar to her mother at that age. "Dad," she said, approaching cautiously. "Wow, you look different." I was wearing one of my new suits, driving the BMW, probably looking more polished than she had ever seen me. For a moment, I felt self-conscious, wondering if she thought I was trying too hard. "Good different or scary different?" I asked, attempting a smile. She hugged me then, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something loosen in my chest. "Good different. You look successful. Happy, maybe?" "I'm working on the happy part." The drive to Westlake Hills took 40 minutes, and we spent most of it catching up on her life in California. She was working as a graphic designer for a tech startup, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates, living the kind of independent young adult life I had never been able to afford at her age. "Dad, I have to ask," she said as we turned into my neighborhood, "how much money did you actually win?" $47 million before taxes. About $28 million after." She was quiet for a moment, processing the magnitude. That's generational wealth. Like, your great-grandchildren won't have to worry about money." "If I ever have great-grandchildren," I said. "That requires you having children first." "One step at a time, Dad." When we pulled into the circular driveway and she saw the mansion for the first time, Emma's reaction was everything I had hoped for and nothing like I expected. "Holy shit, Dad," she breathed, then immediately covered her mouth. "Sorry, I don't usually curse in front of you." "I think winning the lottery gives us both permission to bend some rules," I said. She got out of the car slowly, turning in a complete circle to take in the full scope of the property. The house rose before us like something from a movie set, all stone and glass and architectural drama, with the lake sparkling in the background. "This is really yours?" she asked. "All of it." "Want the tour?" I led her through the mansion, watching her reactions to each room. The kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. The living room with its 20-foot ceilings and wall of windows overlooking the lake. The home theater with its leather recliners and surround sound system. The wine cellar I had no idea how to use. The guest suite that was larger than most people's entire homes. "Dad," she said when we finished, "this is incredible. But it's also kind of overwhelming. How do you even use all this space?" "I don't," I admitted. "Most days, I live in about 3 rooms. The rest is just there." We ended up on the back terrace, sitting by the infinity pool with glasses of iced tea, looking out over Lake Austin. The evening was perfect, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers from the hillsides. "Tell me about Grandma," Emma said after we had settled into comfortable silence. So I told her the full story again, with more details this time. I described the look in my mother's eyes when she realized I was telling the truth, the calculated way she had immediately positioned herself to benefit from my success, the complete absence of any apology or acknowledgement of how cruelly she had treated me. "I keep thinking about what she said," I continued. "Nobody will help you." It wasn't just a prediction, it was like she was putting a curse on me. Like she wanted it to be true. Emma was quiet for a long time, swirling the ice in her glass. "Dad, I need to tell you something that might hurt. But I think you need to know." My stomach tightened. "What?" "Growing up, I always noticed that Grandma treated you differently than she treated Mom and me. She was always critical of your jobs, your clothes, your choices. But I thought that was just because she wanted better for you, you know? Like tough love. But when Mom and I would visit Grandma without you, she would say things. Little comments about how you were unreliable, or how you had never lived up to your potential. She made it sound like you were a burden she had to carry. The words hit me like physical blows, even though I had suspected as much for years. She would compare you to other people's sons who had become doctors or lawyers or businessmen. She would talk about how disappointed she was that you never finished college, never gave her grandchildren she could be proud to talk about. She had you to be proud of, I said quietly. But I was Sarah's daughter, not really yours, in her mind. She always treated you like you were an outsider in your own family. I felt tears threatening and tried to push them back. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want you to understand that her reaction to your lottery win wasn't a surprise or a momentary lapse. It was consistent with how she's always seen you. And I want you to know that her opinion doesn't reflect reality. How do you know? Emma turned in her chair to face me directly. Because I remember what kind of father you were. You came to every school play, even when Mom said she could handle it alone. You taught me to ride a bike in that empty parking lot behind the grocery store, running beside me for hours until I got it right. When I was scared of thunderstorms, you would sit in my room and tell me stories about brave princesses until I fell asleep. That was a long time ago. But it matters. It shaped who I am. And when you and Mom divorced, you never once said anything negative about her to me, even though I know she hurt you badly. You could have turned me against her, but you didn't. I had to look away, overwhelmed by her words. You're not perfect, Dad. You've made mistakes. You probably could have called me more over the years, tried harder to stay connected. But you're not the failure Grandma made you feel like you were. Then why does it hurt so much? Because she's your mother, Emma said simply. No matter how old we get, we never stop wanting our parents to love us unconditionally. We sat in silence as the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Boats moved lazily across the water, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of children playing. What happens now? I asked. With Grandma? With everything. With you, with your mother, with this life I've accidentally created. Emma smiled for the first time since arriving. Well, for starters, you could invite me to visit more often. This place is pretty amazing, and I wouldn't mind having a millionaire dad who spoils me occasionally. I can do that. And as for Mom, she's going to find out eventually. It would be better if she heard it from you. I know. I'm just not sure I'm ready for that conversation. What are you afraid of? I thought about it for a moment. I'm afraid she'll want to come back. Not because she loves me, but because I have money now. And I'm afraid that part of me might be stupid enough to let her. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. Dad, you survived Grandma's rejection when you were at your most vulnerable. You're stronger than you think. That night, after Emma had gone to bed in one of the guest suites, I stood in my bedroom looking out at the lake. For the first time since winning the lottery, I felt something approaching peace. Not happiness exactly, but a quiet satisfaction that maybe I was finally on the right path. My daughter loved me. Not my money, not my success, not my ability to provide for her, just me, flawed and imperfect as I was. It was a kind of love I had forgotten existed, a love I had given up hoping for. Tomorrow, we would figure out the rest. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt like someone's father again. And that was worth more than any lottery jackpot. Emma stayed for 4 days, and they were the best days I'd had since winning the lottery. We fell into an easy rhythm, morning coffee by the pool, afternoon drives around Austin, evenings talking on the terrace as the sun set over the lake. She helped me pick out artwork for the walls, laughing at my complete lack of taste, and taught me how to use the smart home system that controlled everything from the lights to the sound system. Dad, you literally own a house that's smarter than most people, and you're still using light switches like it's 1995, she teased as she programmed voice commands for the living room. I'm old school, I protested. You're 57, not 97. Learn to adapt. On her last night, we were sitting by the pool when her phone buzzed with a text message. I watched her face change as she read it, her smile fading into something more serious. What is it? I asked. It's Mom. She wants to know when I'm coming home, and she's asking questions about my visit with you. What kind of questions? Emma showed me the phone. The messages were typical Sarah, polite on the surface but loaded with subtext. Hope you're having a nice visit with your father. Has he told you about his new circumstances? I'm concerned about how this sudden change might be affecting him. She knows, I said. Probably. News travels fast in small communities. Someone probably saw you at the lottery office or the real estate agency. Or your grandmother told her. Emma nodded grimly. That's more likely. Grandma's probably been working the phone lines, sharing her version of events. Which would be that I'm having some kind of breakdown and treating family badly. Something like that. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the peaceful bubble of the past few days starting to crack. Your mother is going to want to talk to me. Probably. The question is, do you want to talk to her? It was a fair question, and one I'd been avoiding since the moment I won the lottery. Sarah and I had been divorced for 8 years, but our relationship had been troubled long before that. She had married me when we were both young and optimistic, back when she believed my construction work was temporary and I would eventually become something more substantial. When it became clear that I was content with physical labor, that I found satisfaction in building things with my hands rather than climbing corporate ladders, her disappointment had grown into something harder to live with. The final straw had come when I turned down a management position that would have meant more money but also more stress and less time with Emma. You have no ambition, she had told me during one of our final arguments. You're content to be mediocre, and I can't spend the rest of my life pretending that's enough. Now, 8 years later, I was worth $28 million and living in a mansion that would make her new husband's suburban home look like a starter apartment. The irony wasn't lost on me. I don't know if I want to talk to her, I admitted. But I know I need to. She's Emma's mother, and she's going to be part of our lives whether I like it or not. Would it help if I was there? When you call her, I mean? I was about to answer when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sarah's name, and we both stared at it for a moment. Speak of the devil, I said. Answer it, Dad. Get it over with. I took a deep breath and accepted the call. Hello, Sarah. Ethan. Her voice was carefully controlled, the tone she used when she was trying to manage a difficult situation. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. I know Emma is visiting you. It's fine. What can I do for you? I think we need to talk. About your recent windfall. My windfall? Don't play games with me, Ethan. Half of Dallas knows you won the lottery. Mrs. Chen from the grocery store called me yesterday to congratulate me on my ex-husband's good fortune. Apparently, it's been all over the local news. I closed my eyes. Of course it had been on the news. Lottery winners always were, especially when they bought $12 million houses immediately afterward. Okay, I said. So you know. What did you want to talk about? I want to make sure Emma is safe. This kind of sudden wealth can change people, make them act irrationally. And from what I'm hearing, you've been having some issues with your family relationships. There it was, my mother's version of events, filtered through whatever gossip network connected Austin to Dallas. What exactly have you heard? That you've been cruel to your mother, that you've cut her off financially and emotionally. That you're living in some ostentatious mansion and flaunting your wealth inappropriately. Emma was gesturing for me to put the call on speaker, so I did. Sarah, I said, did anyone tell you what happened before I supposedly became cruel to my mother? I know you claim she didn't believe you about winning, but Ethan, you have to understand her position. You've never been the most reliable person when it comes to financial matters. The words stung, partly because there was truth in them. I had never made much money, had always struggled to provide the lifestyle Sarah wanted for our family. That's fair, I said. But did anyone tell you that when I went to share the good news with her, the biggest moment of my life, she threw me out of her house without even looking at the evidence? That she told me nobody would help me? That the only reason she changed her tune was when she realized she could profit from my success? There was silence on the other end of the line. And did anyone tell you, I continued, that I bought this house not to flaunt my wealth, but because I spent 57 years believing I wasn't good enough for the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally? Ethan. Sarah's voice had changed, some of the control slipping. I'm not the same man you divorced, Sarah. The money didn't change me, it revealed me. It showed me who I really am when I'm not spending every waking moment trying to prove I'm worthy of love. Emma was smiling at me, giving me an encouraging nod. I want to see you, Sarah said suddenly. I want to see this house, understand what's happening with you. For Emma's sake, if nothing else. For Emma's sake? She's my daughter, Ethan. If her father has undergone some dramatic life change, I need to know that she's safe with you. I looked at Emma, who shrugged and mouthed, "It's up to you." "Fine," I said. "Come to Austin this weekend." "But Sarah, I want you to understand something before you do." "What?" "I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your validation or your concern or your management of my relationship with Emma. If you want to visit, you're welcome. But you're coming as a guest, not as someone who has any authority over my life." Another long silence. "I'll drive down Saturday morning," she said finally. After she hung up, Emma and I sat quietly for a moment. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted. "But also, ready, I think. For the first time in my adult life, I'm not approaching a conversation with your mother hoping she'll finally see my worth. I know my worth now. And what if she tries to get back together with you? What if the money makes her realize she made a mistake?" It was the question I'd been dreading, the scenario that had kept me awake at night. Then I'll have to decide whether the man I've become wants to be with the woman who left him for not being enough. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Dad." "For what?" "For finally standing up for yourself. For not letting other people's opinions define your worth. For becoming the kind of father I always knew you could be." That night, after Emma flew back to California, I stood in my empty mansion and tried to imagine Sarah walking through these rooms. Would she see the success she had always wanted me to achieve? Would she understand that I had built this life not in spite of her rejection, but because of it? Or would she see only an opportunity, a chance to reclaim a relationship that might now be profitable? I supposed I would find out on Saturday. But one thing was certain, the man she would meet in this mansion was not the man she had left 8 years ago. That man had believed he needed to be more than he was to deserve love. This man knew better. If you're enjoying this emotional journey, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life stories that will touch your heart and make you think about what truly matters in life. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful human experiences. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of oppressive Texas heat that makes everything feel heavy and inevitable. I had been awake since 5 a.m., pacing through my mansion like a caged animal, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting, preparing for a conversation I wasn't sure I wanted to have. At exactly 10 a.m., I heard the crunch of gravel in my driveway. Through the window, I watched Sarah step out of her silver Honda, the same practical car she'd always preferred, now looking almost comically modest against the backdrop of my circular driveway. She stood for a moment, staring up at the mansion with an expression I couldn't read from this distance. Then she smoothed her dress, squared her shoulders, and walked toward my front door with the determined stride I remembered from our marriage. I opened the door before she could knock. "Hello, Sarah." "Ethan." She looked me up and down, taking in my casual but expensive clothes, the confidence in my posture that hadn't been there 8 years ago. "You look different. Money has a way of doing that to people." We stood there for an awkward moment before I stepped aside to let her in. I watched her face as she took in the marble foyer, the sweeping staircase, the crystal chandelier that probably cost more than her car. "This is really yours?" she asked, her voice small. "All of it. Want the tour?" I led her through the mansion, watching her reactions to each room. Unlike Emma's genuine excitement and wonder, Sarah's responses were more complicated. I could see her calculating, evaluating, trying to reconcile this opulent reality with the man she had left for his lack of ambition. "The kitchen is beautiful," she said as we stood in the gourmet space with its marble countertops and professional appliances. "You always said you wanted to learn to cook." "I have a chef now. Turns out when you can afford to pay someone to do the things you're not good at, life gets easier." She flinched slightly at the edge in my voice. We ended up on the back terrace, sitting by the infinity pool where Emma and I had shared so many good conversations just days before. But with Sarah, the same space felt charged with tension and unresolved history. "I owe you an apology," she said after we'd settled into uncomfortable silence. "For what specifically?" "For doubting you. For treating you like you were limited. When we were married, I was so focused on what I thought success should look like that I couldn't see the value in what you actually were." "And what was I, Sarah?" She was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the lake. "You were kind. Steady. You never missed Emma's school events, never broke a promise to her, never raised your voice even when I was screaming at you. You were a good man, and I convinced myself that wasn't enough." "Why wasn't it enough?" "Because I was scared," she admitted. "My parents struggled financially my whole childhood. My father worked 3 jobs and my mother clipped coupons and we still barely made ends meet. I swore I would never live that way, and I thought the only security came from climbing ladders and making more money. So you married someone you thought would become successful, and when I didn't transform into your vision, you decided I was a failure." "Yes. And I was wrong." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation, but I saw only genuine regret and something that might have been shame. "Sarah, are you here because you're sorry for how you treated me, or because you want back into a life that now includes $28 million? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah's face went through several expressions before settling on something that looked like pain. "I don't know," she said finally. "And that's the most honest answer I can give you." It wasn't the answer I had expected, but it was the one I respected. "When I heard about the lottery win," she continued, "my first thought wasn't about money. It was about vindication. I thought, he finally did it. He finally became something more. And then I realized how twisted that was, as if you needed to win the lottery to be worth something. I spent 8 years believing exactly that. And now?" I leaned back in my chair, feeling the Texas sun on my face, looking out over a view that cost $12 million but couldn't buy peace of mind. Now I know that the problem was never that I wasn't enough. The problem was that I surrounded myself with people who couldn't see my worth unless it came with a price tag. Sarah nodded slowly. "Including me. Including you. So where does that leave us?" I had been dreading this question, but now that it was here, I found I knew the answer. It leaves us as Emma's parents. It leaves us as two people who once loved each other but couldn't make it work. And it leaves us with the opportunity to be better to each other going forward than we were in the past. That's it? That's everything, Sarah. I'm not angry at you anymore, and I'm not trying to punish you. But I'm also not the same man who would have taken you back just to feel less alone. She was quiet for a long time, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I'm proud of you, Ethan. Not for the money, but for this. For who you've become. For standing up for yourself. I never thought you had it in you to tell people like me to go to hell. I didn't tell you to go to hell. You told me something worse. You told me I don't get to define your worth anymore. As she prepared to leave, standing in my marble foyer one last time, Sarah turned back to me. For what it's worth, I think you're going to be happier without me. Without any of us who couldn't love you the way you deserved. After she left, I sat by my pool until the sun went down, thinking about forgiveness and growth and the strange way that money had become a mirror, showing me not just who I was, but who everyone else really was too. I had won the lottery, but more importantly, I had won something else, the knowledge that I was enough, exactly as I was, with or without $28 million. Now I just had to figure out what to do with that knowledge. 2 weeks after Sarah's visit, I was sitting in my home office reviewing investment portfolios when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. We hadn't spoken since that devastating confrontation in her living room, and I had assumed we never would again. But something made me answer. Hello, Mother. Ethan. Her voice sounded different, smaller, friendlier than I remembered. I need to see you. Why? I'm sick, son. The doctors found something in my lungs, and they're not sure, they're not optimistic about the timeline. The words hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything that had happened between us, she was still my mother. The woman who had raised me, taught me to ride a bike, stayed up with me when I had pneumonia as a child. How sick? I asked. Stage 4. Maybe 6 months, maybe less. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of guilt and obligation settling on my shoulders. But this time, something was different. This time, I could feel the weight without being crushed by it. I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. I want to make things right between us before it's too late. Can you come see me? Please? I could hear the desperation in her voice, the fear of facing death with unresolved conflicts. Part of me, the part that had spent 57 years seeking her approval, wanted to rush to her side immediately. But the part of me that had learned to value my own worth hesitated. Mom, the last time I saw you, you told me nobody would help me. You called me a liar when I tried to share the best news of my life with you. You threw me out of your house without a second thought. I know. I was wrong. And then, when you realized the money was real, you immediately started calculating how you could benefit from it. Ethan, please. I'm dying. The words hung in the air like a weapon she expected would end all resistance. And maybe, 8 months ago, it would have. But I had learned something important about love and obligation, about forgiveness and self-respect. I know you're dying, Mom. And I'm genuinely sorry about that. But being sick doesn't erase the choice you made when you thought I was still poor. I was protecting myself. I've been disappointed so many times. No, I interrupted. You were protecting your right to judge me. You were protecting your position as the person who gets to decide whether I'm worthy of love. Silence stretched between us, filled with years of accumulated hurt and resentment. What do you want from me? She asked finally. Nothing, Mom. That's what I've finally learned. I don't want your approval, your apology, or your deathbed reconciliation. I wanted those things for 57 years, and they almost destroyed me. So you're just going to let me die alone? The manipulation was so familiar, so practiced, that I almost smiled. Even facing her own mortality, my mother couldn't resist trying to control me through guilt. You're not alone, Mom. You have friends, neighbors, people from your church. What you don't have is a son who's willing to pretend that your love was ever unconditional. I do love you, Ethan. Maybe you do. But you love the idea of having a successful son more than you ever loved me as I actually am. The lottery didn't change who I was, it just revealed who you are. I could hear her crying on the other end of the line, and it broke something in my chest. But it didn't break my resolve. I'm not coming to see you, Mom. Not because I hate you, but because I finally love myself enough not to accept scraps of affection from someone who withheld it when I needed it most. Please, Ethan. I'm begging you. You're begging now because you're scared. But when I was scared, when I needed shelter, support, just basic human kindness, you whispered that nobody would help me. You were wrong then, and you're wrong now. What do you mean? People will help me, Mom. Emma helps me by loving me unconditionally. Mrs. Henderson from my old apartment helps me by treating me with basic human decency. Even Sarah, in her way, helped me by finally being honest about our past. I took a deep breath, feeling something fundamental shifting inside me. The only person who won't help me is you. And the only person I can't help anymore is you. Ethan. Goodbye, Mom. I hope you find peace. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my mansion, surrounded by luxury that had once seemed like the answer to all my problems. But I realized now that the real treasure wasn't the money, it was the clarity it had given me about who deserved a place in my life. That evening, I called Emma. Dad? How are you? I'm good, sweetheart. Really good. I wanted to ask you something. What? How would you feel about moving to Texas? I was thinking of starting a foundation, maybe funding scholarships for kids from working-class families. I could use someone with your design skills to help build something meaningful. Dad, are you serious? Dead serious. I've spent 8 months learning how to be rich, but I think it's time I learned how to be useful. I would love that. But what brought this on? I looked out over Lake Austin, where the evening light was painting everything gold, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine contentment. I finally figured out what winning the lottery really gave me, I said. It wasn't money. It was the freedom to choose who I want to be, and who I want to share my life with. And who do you want to share it with? People who see my worth regardless of my bank account. People who love me on Tuesday the same way they love me on Lottery Wednesday. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Emma. And for the first time in my life, I believe I deserve that love. After we hung up, I walked out to my terrace and looked up at the Texas stars. Somewhere in Austin, my mother was facing her mortality alone, probably cursing my name. Somewhere in Dallas, Sarah was living her safe, predictable life with her new husband. And here I was, in a mansion worth millions, finally understanding that the most valuable thing I owned couldn't be bought, sold, or inherited. It was the knowledge that I was enough, exactly as I was, with or without anyone's approval. The lottery had made me rich. But learning to love myself had made me free. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of the Crawford Foundation, watching Emma present our first scholarship program to a room full of educators and community leaders. She had moved to Austin 3 months ago, and seeing her passion for our work filled me with a pride I had never experienced before, not pride in achievement, but pride in purpose. The Crawford Scholars Program will provide full college scholarships to 50 students annually, Emma explained, clicking through her presentation with the confidence of someone who knew she was changing lives. We're specifically targeting kids from working-class families, students whose parents work with their hands, who understand the value of labor but dream of something more. After the meeting, as we walked out to the parking garage, Emma linked her arm through mine. "Dad, did you see Mrs. Rodriguez's face when we announced the funding amount? I thought she was going to cry." "I did see it. And I understood it. That's what it looks like when someone realizes their kid's future just got a lot brighter." "Is this what you thought it would feel like? Being rich, I mean?" I considered the question as we reached my car, not the flashy BMW anymore, but a practical Toyota that got me where I needed to go without announcing my net worth to everyone I passed. "No," I said honestly. "I thought having money would make me feel powerful, important, validated. Instead, it just made me feel responsible." 3 weeks later, I received a call from a lawyer in Austin. My mother had passed away in her sleep. The funeral was small, a handful of church friends, some neighbors, and me. I sat in the back row, listening to a pastor who barely knew her talk about her devotion to family, and felt nothing but a quiet sadness for the relationship we could have had if she had been capable of unconditional love. After the service, Mrs. Chen from my mother's neighborhood approached me. "Your mother talked about you all the time," she said kindly. "She was so proud when she heard about your success." I thanked her for the sentiment, but I knew the truth. My mother had been proud of my success, not of me. There was a difference, and understanding that difference had saved my life. A year after winning the lottery, I hosted a dinner party at my mansion. Not the kind of ostentatious display I had once imagined, but a simple gathering of people who mattered. Emma was there with her new boyfriend, a teacher she had met through our foundation work. Mrs. Henderson, my old neighbor, had driven down from San Antonio with her grandson. Even Rosa from Murphy's Corner store came, the woman who had sold me the winning ticket. As we sat around my dining room table, sharing stories and laughter, I realized this was what wealth was supposed to feel like, not isolated luxury, but the ability to bring together the people you love and create moments that matter. "Dad," Emma said as we cleared the dishes, "I have something to tell you." "What's that?" "I'm proud of you. Not for the money, not for the house, not for the foundation, though all of that is amazing. I'm proud of you for becoming the kind of person who deserves good things." "I always deserved good things, Emma. I just didn't know it." "I know. That's what makes me proud." That night, after everyone had gone home, I walked out to my terrace one last time. The lake stretched out before me, dark and peaceful under a canopy of stars. I thought about the man I had been a year ago, desperate for approval, convinced of his own inadequacy, carrying a lottery ticket he didn't dare believe could change his life. I thought about my mother's whispered curse, "Nobody will help you." She had been wrong. People had helped me, Emma with her love, Mrs. Henderson with her kindness, even Sarah with her honesty about our past. But more importantly, I had finally learned to help myself. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Crawford, my name is Miguel Santos. I received one of your scholarships this year. I wanted you to know that because of you, I'll be the first person in my family to go to college. Thank you for seeing potential in kids like me. Thank you for believing we're worth investing in." I sat down in one of my patio chairs and read the message 3 times, feeling something warm and profound settle in my chest. This was what my mother had never understood, that true worth isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give away. The lottery ticket had been worth $47 million. But the real prize had been learning that my value as a human being was never up for sale in the first place. 57 years old, and I was finally free to be exactly who I was meant to be, not a rich man trying to prove his worth, but a man who happened to be rich using his resources to prove the worth of others. My mother had whispered that nobody would help me. But she never imagined that the most important person who could help me was myself. And in learning to help myself, I had discovered something even more valuable than any lottery jackpot: the ability to help others find their own worth too. The Texas stars shone down on my mansion by the lake, but for the first time since winning, I knew that home wasn't a place you could buy. Home was the peace you felt when you finally stopped trying to be someone else's definition of enough. Thank you for joining us on Ethan's incredible journey from rejection to self-acceptance. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear that they are enough, exactly as they are. Remember, the most valuable treasure isn't what others think of you, it's what you think of yourself. Until next time, take care of your hearts.